Piper to share her finding in earnings conference call in Argumentation today. So let's welcome to Ala, and once you are ready, please start your.
Yeah. So you can see my screen now and you hear me well, right?
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for being here. My name is Ala Hamza. I wish I could make it to Japan to join you there, but yeah, it's also nice to meet you virtually. It's still the morning for us right now. So many of you have participated in the FinArc shared task and the subtask that is related to earnings conference calls data. So in today's talk and under the title Argumentation in Financial Language, the case of earnings conference calls, I'm going to show you the provenance and the birth of these data. So let me first introduce you to this scenario, which I will further address during my talk. As you may know, every public strategy company has to do financial disclosures in every fiscal quarter. So every 3 months, there is an event known as earnings conference call. And those calls, as any conference, include first a presentation given by the company executives summarizing their last quarter earnings or performance and making forecasts to the next one. And after that, a question and answering session where the company management has to reply to professional analyst questions and business journalist queries. And as you can expect, during these calls, argumentation represents an instrument for building, maintaining, and also restoring the trustworthiness in front of the market participants. So in front of investors, client, analysts, and etc. And of course, with the goal of persuasion, with the goal of convincing them to invest in the company stock. And after the call, analysts usually announce their expectations or their predictions to this stock, special stock, as a price target and recommendation. So the price target is their forecast to the stock price in the next quarter, while the recommendation takes the form of 5-scale ranking. So between 1, which represents a strong buy, to 5, which is a strong sell. And many investors tend to rely on the analyst recommendations as one main factor to make their investment decisions, which at the end, of course, lead to the price movement itself. But what if the investor doesn't want to pay any broker and he still wants to base or support his decision on the information given during the conference? So let's see, where does the issue come from? Here is an example of what those conference discussions look like. So here we have 2 companies, company A and company B, and both are claiming increasing revenue here in bold for the next quarter. So they are stating some reasons to justify their claims, and they are arguing about it, right? Now, if we base it to the nature intelligence, which company would you invest in? So both of them are stating that in the fiscal 2023, we are expecting to increase our revenue at least twice. And of course, company B, it's the same. It's the global market is expected to remain buoyant in the 2023. And then we have to read all of that, right, and to analyze it. And this is obviously very hard and time consuming to analyze the argumentation in this text and to judge it correctly. And so, you know, in reality, these are just maybe half a page of a real financial report, like 10 pages in average. And that's updated per quarter. So very huge information, very huge data. Besides to that, the financial language has its jargon and its specificities. So it's proved also to be different than the normal natural language, sorry. So even for a simple linguistic task like sentiment analysis, the task is different when we come to the financial text analysis. So we need AI to automatically reason this text and to help us to efficiently understand this text. And in our method, we are aiming at automatically retrieving the arguments, highlighting the strong and weak ones, which could increase the efficiency of analyzing those long documents. In addition, given that recommendations of analysts can be influenced by different factors, we want in our study to inspect the correlation between analyst recommendations and the quality of answers they got during the call. So how? Through argument mining and argument quality assessment. So what we want to model those arguments in a way that we can analyze, rank, and judge. And we want a machine learning model that can automatically retrieve those arguments, but also stay robust to new changes over time, like company acquisition or launching new products, new services, and etc. Therefore, our raised research questions are first, how to model the argument structure and to provide reliable annotations in earnings conference calls. So there are many proposed models in argumentation theory and more than 90 schemes. And the question is how to choose the most relevant one to this type of text. And we want also to ensure that our selected structure can provide reliable annotations in practice. Our second research question is how to model the quality of company representatives' arguments during earnings conference calls. So we need also to model the quality of these arguments. And we need a model that can establish a link between the two different perspectives, the financial perspective and the NLP perspective of argument quality. And third, how to build and evaluate an argumentation parser that can generalize over domain shift. So as I said, we are expecting new variants over time, and we want our model to still stay stable across those variants. In this talk, I'm going to address the first two questions. So how to model the structure and the quality of the arguments. So the agenda of today's talk, so far we talked about the problem we have and we defined our research questions. To solve them, we will look at the computational argumentation tasks and the existing related work. Later on, we will talk about the modeling of the argument structure and the argument quality in earnings conference calls. Then we will discuss a bit about our output data and its correlation to analyst recommendations and price targets. After that, we will have a look at the current state of computational argumentation, and again from both perspectives, from NLP and financial perspective. Finally, we conclude our findings and future work. So here we have an instance of argument from our previous example. So in this instance, we have the global market for power transmission and distribution infrastructure is expected to remain buoyant in 2023, and that the claim, okay? And the promise is justifying it that demand is forecast to be driven in Europe and North America by the need for equipment replacement, improved grid reliability and efficiency, and etc., etc. So here the speaker is claiming that the global market will continue growing and justifying that by the existence need of equipment. And this is the minimum sort of an argument. So one claim supported by one promise. If we project this example to computational tasks, the first argument mining task is argument identification, which separates argumentative statements from non-argumentative ones in a given text. On top of it, the argument unit classification, so the classification of these argumentative texts into a promise or a claim. And if we also tackle the detection and the classification of the relation between the promise and the claim, so represent that in a sort of a graph, then we are in the argument structure classification task. Now, if we further ask, how good is this argument? Is it convincing? Is it well supported, etc.? This is known as the argument assessment, which mostly consider the ranking of its quality. Researchers also paid attention to the argument generation task, and in my work, I considered the first 4 ones. In this talk, I'm going, as I said, to consider just the structure model and the argument quality model. So now let's see how argumentation has been studied in finance in the literature. Not surprisingly, argumentation has been addressed first in business communication studies, which all lead to the conclusion that argumentation strategies are highly adapted and essential to be able to analyze the quality of managers' speech. However, those studies are somehow theoretical and suffer from the limited sample size they address. Therefore, a research gap exists here, which is the lack of the practical evidence about the applicability of argumentation to a real financial goal. On the other hand, different financial studies found that question and answering sessions are more informative and have more impact on the market price change than the presentation part. And I'm going to adapt this. So in our data, we consider only the analysis of the question and answering sessions of the earnings conference calls. And recently, and to the best of my knowledge, the study of Batenza et al. In 2019 was the first one to address a computational method towards the prediction of analyst recommendations based on the arguments in the call. Okay, so this is the first one that tries to consider the arguments in a computational way to make the prediction of the analyst recommendation. However, they assume abstractly that every paragraph is an argument, which of course doesn't correspond to the real definition of argument or argument component that we have seen earlier. And also, this doesn't help to find argument quality, which is mainly based on defining its premises. Alternatively, in 2021, Shen et al., so Dr. Shen suggested that in their interesting book to use the Tolman model to represent the argument structure and insisted on the need of studying the manager opinion equality through the analysis of the argument quality. However, they didn't come up with any baseline model for the argument quality itself. The other facet of the problem is argument mining and argument quality as seen by NLP researchers. And in fact, this is very vast and diverse. Argument mining is proved to be very domain dependent. So there are a wide range of proposals that are always based on the task and the data source at hand. And this is a challenge. Existing data sets follow different annotation schemes, and they are usually relatively small. So having homogeneous data in a small training set raises the question whether the machine learning model is memorizing these examples rather than identifying patterns that are representatives of the broader problem. And with the emergence of large language models, some studies explored them towards argument mining, but for sure, computational argumentation is still not fairly explored by large language models. Therefore, we have also to consider the domain generalization issue, the specific components of the financial data while evaluating our model. So let's start by the first research question, how we can model the argument structure and provide reliable annotations in earnings conference calls. We have 3 categories of argumentation models in argument theory. First of all, the monological models, where we focus on the internal structure of a single argument. So the structure of the premises and the claims and how they are connected to each other, the microstructure of the argument. On top of it, the dialogical models, which focus on the external relations between the arguments in a discussion or debate or similar. So the macrostructure of the argument. And lastly, rhetorical models, which focus on the rhetorical patterns of an argument. So neither micro or macro structure. And what we want in our study is to analyze the arguments of the managers. So not the whole discussion, not the arguments of both sides. We don't assume that the analysts are stating arguments rather than questions. So we focus on the analyst arguments, sorry, not the analyst, the manager's argument, the company executive's arguments in their answers during this question and answering session. So we believe that the monological models are the most relevant in this case to model our arguments. And in this direction, the Tolman model is the most popular one, and it's widely used conceptual model for argumentation. Sorry, and it was proposed in the domain of philosophy of law by Tolman. So first of all, it came from philosophy, and as you can see here, so this is the structure of the model. This model consists of 6 argument components, and the claim, the data, the warrant that justify this claim, and then the backing of it, of this warrant. And also it contains a qualifier, for example, almost, money, some, so such keywords, and a rebuttal component for a potential objection of this argument. And according to Tolman, it's important that the arguer shows the awareness of a possible counter-argument. However, despite the fact that this model sets the normative view of a perfect sound argument, it has several drawbacks to be applied in computational argumentation. First, having all these 6 parts is not common in ordinary argumentation. The warrant almost is never declared in daily arguments. And so it's more fuzzy to separate these latter, the backing that support the whole argument from an ordinary premise, a normal premise, which is the component 2 here. It's described as data. So in practice, we believe that this could be a bit confusing for our annotators and not the best setting for it. And then we decide to go for a more simple way of annotating the argument based on what are the component, the core argument, the core component that we want in our argument. So that's also because that our data is concerning oral argumentation. So it's limited by time, and it's unscripted quick answer. So we can't guarantee that our argument hierarchy would be represent all these components or even half of them. So to smooth the annotation enough, we decide to accept any microstructure scheme of the argument and to focus on the essence of the argument, like the promise, the claim, and the relation. Okay, so that's a sample of our proposed argument annotation, and we accept any way of structuring this argument. We follow the one claim approach. So in our arguments, we accept only one claim, and all the other supporting evidences will be annotated as promises. And the relation between the promise and the claim can be a support or an attack. So coming back to our example, in company A, they claim this to achieve their previously announced full-year growth targets, increasing the revenue at least twice, and increasing the profit from operations, and that's the claim. And now we have the first promise. During the fiscal 2023, we intend to continue to sell real estate assets. Okay, and would selling the estate assets increase the revenue or increase the profit from operations? It's not. It can increase the cash, but not the revenue from operations. And then, so this relation is an attack. The second promise, potential effects related to compliance matters are not yet quantified. And we can see obviously that this promise is attacking the very quantitative claim at least twice. So they are claiming some increasement with at least twice the rate of the global GDP growth, but at the same time, some effects are not yet studied, are not yet quantified. So this is again an attack premise to the claim. Also, effects from our new program to reduce our marketing, selling, administrative expenses are not yet quantified. So it's again not yet quantified, but it's not expected to have material savings impact already in fiscal 2023. So the annotator expect that, okay, at least this is an aware promise and a clear promise. So it's annotated to be supporting the claim. For the second company, we have again some promises. Here it seems more supporting the claim because all of them are based on a demand that is driven by some needs. So they are stating where is the demand and how it is driven by some development requirement or by the need of equipment replacement and so on. So those are logically supporting the claim that we will have the market will remain buoyant. And lastly, the manager, and since this is an oral conversation, somehow reformulate the same claim. So based on these assumptions and barring an extended recession in the global economy, our company expects, etc., etc. And here we annotate that as a claim reformulation. So just in order to distinguish between the basic claim of the argument and any reformulation, that it's not a promise, not another claim, just a confirmation and re-insisting on the same conclusion. So we annotate that as a reformulate, and we reformulated the claim. So this is not part of the main argument we have here. So now if we look at the initial claims alone, it's partially impossible to determine which one of the two forecasts is more credible. Now, subjecting them to the claim promise analysis yields results that begin to drive a clear wedge between the two forecasts, right? Now we want to go further and to see if we can judge the quality of these arguments and if we can automatically judge this quality. And to have the financial perspective, we did this work in collaboration with the chair of financial data analytics here at the University of Passau. And very briefly, I can say that based on the intensive analysis of both lines of research, we derived our taxonomy of argument quality metrics. Okay, so we analyzed the both lines, the text quality in finance and business communication, and the argument quality assessment in NLP computational argumentation. And actually, in some cases, we found a clear link between both. For example, text uncertainty, which is highlighted in financial studies as an indicator for bad forecast, is the same as the argument specificity in NLP perspective. On the other hand, the temporal information assessment composes a special phenomenon in financial opinions. So studying the time associated with the given information and estimating its impact period are important research questions to the stock market. And different financial studies found that executives tend to emphasize on the progress and the future expectations in their crisis corpus. So while they report achievements in their recovery time period, this means when they are having a hard period of reporting their performance, then they will focus on the future expectation rather than the achievements they have. And that means that providing past information reflects better forecasts. Hence, we ignore the future expressions and rather weight the temporal spans of text that represents a real value for finance by recognizing 5 degrees of temporal history. And yeah, otherwise we defined, so far I have talked about the argument specificity, the temporal history. We also consider the argument objectivity as a binary manner. We consider the promise type, the strengths, and I will go for that further in the next slide. So we define our model for quality on two levels, on the overall argument quality, so considering both the premise and the claim and the premises and the relation between them, so the overall structure of the argument. And in this direction, we have five metrics: the strength of the strength of the argument, so how well the argument contributes to the persuasiveness, considering the count and the type of supporting premises. So how many supporting premises and what type they are. And we consider the ranking of that as a 3 degrees scale, so 0, 1, or 2. Specific, how well the statement is precise and answers directly the question. So again, the uncertainty and hedging are only indicators of the lack of commitment to the content of the speech. And yeah, and this is logical. Qualitative analysis can't be separated from its quantitative property in financial area. So we concentrate on the specificity, but further from two angles: the specificity of the answer in relation to the asked question, and the specificity to the premises of and the claims through identifying their particular types. The persuasiveness of the argument. Okay, actually, this is the most subjective attribute to judge. It's very subjective. Yet it's still taken into account by many other studies. And this could be due to the fact that we have a more holistic feedback from the annotator about all argument elements and their coordination between each other by having this holistic judgment of the persuasiveness. The objectivity, so being objective, is very essential from the market perspective. Arguing by opinions or particular views has less impact on investors than arguing with objective information and reach earnings. So we better classify this to 0 or 1 if the argument is based on facts rather than feelings or opinions. The temporal history, as we have discussed, we focus on the time history, and we graded as shown here. So 3 very recent information coming from the last quarter that we are reporting now. 2 is very short past, so up to 2 quarters. 1 is middle past, so half to 1 year. 0 is long past, more than 1 year, and -1 is not mentioned explicitly. So no time signature is mentioned in this case. And of course, that's because if the manager is talking about fixing bugs in the very recent product like iPhone 15 or 15 Plus, this is more relevant than talking about fixing some bugs in iPhone 12, for example. So we have to consider that also to take it into account. Okay, so to the other level of the argument quality, we consider it on the argument unit types. Okay, so in fact, despite the fact that knowing the types of the argument claims or the promises can give us a clear estimation about its quality, the literature reports very rare attempts toward this research direction. Moreover, the annotation of these types could be more objective and less biased itself than scoring the whole argument towards one attribute, like the strength, the clarity, the persuasiveness, etc. Hence, we elaborated part of the data with one of our annotators, and we suggest the following pragmatic types of promises and claims. So, for example, we have claim type to be value, fact, opinion, policy, reformulated as we have seen earlier, or other if nothing of those matches. And the promise type are the following: real example, fact, statistics, hypothesis, or others. So while rhetorical figures, for example, play a role in legal text argumentation, real-world values speak for themselves in financial communication. So therefore, if we have a promise with the type statistics, then we know this is a stronger promise. So just knowing the type of the premise and the claim can give us a hint about how strong is or how good is this argument. Okay, coming back to our examples. Sorry? Okay, coming back to our example. I can't hear if there is some problem, or should I go on?
Sorry, it's a little bit noisy outside, so please.
I can't hear you well, sorry.
I said, please continue your talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, coming to our examples, if we are now applying the argument model we have to the examples, we can give the overall argument here is strong of 0, specific of 0, persuasive of 0, because we have attracting promises and only one supporting promise. There is no temporal inference mentioned here, so it's annotated with -1. And we considered objective to 1 because at least what is not studied or not analyzed, it's mentioned. And we also annotate the type of the claim and the promises. The same for company B, but here it seems better argument with some fact of promises. Only one was a hypothesis promise. And so the annotator annotate this argument with a strong 1, specific 2, persuasive 2, and the temporal history 3, because here we have some information from this quarter, and it is again an objective argument. So we can know that this argument replaces a better argument from the first one, or company B is a better a company to invest in, that's company A. Okay. And yeah, now moving to the data. In the research community, at least, there is a lot of focus on the machine learning models, but if you like in real world, and if we are fine-tuning those already advanced models we have now, we discover that the architecture doesn't matter much. What matters is the data, and without a good quality data, what we can do. So we want now to apply these models to have some data. The annotation study, in our annotation study, we chose 4 tech companies having similar economic conditions operating in the same field, and which annotators can understand their jargon, products, and services. That's because our annotators are 3 computer science students, and one is doing or was doing his master in international economic and business studies. So we downloaded the data from Modeling Financial Prep, and we used Label Studio as an annotation tool. And we have the period of 5 years, so from 2015 to 2019. So the process was we defined the guidelines, we elaborated some data with one of the annotators to define the guidelines. We have some training sessions, double annotation to calculate the inter-annotator arguments, agreement, and then some error correction, and that took in total 9 months of work. And yeah, okay. I won't have time to cover these data statistics in detail, but I can say that in total we had about 850 documents, and we achieved a good level of inter-annotator agreement between our annotators. And this answers completely our first research question. In terms of the data, the argument model, so the argument quality model, we also cover this data with the quality attributes we have defined, and we call the output data fin arg quality. So just to give you an iPerson view on the distribution of this data, a document has in average 12 argumentative sentences and 6 out of argument. This makes about 70% of the data consists of argumentative components. And this confirms the value of studying this kind of data by means of argument mining. And so this confirm our choice to study earnings conference calls by argument mining and argument quality. It's worth it. To analyze the correlation, we have to point that understanding the impact of earnings conference calls is not by the count of recommendations itself toward this market, the count of analyst recommendation. Rather, it's by how this recommendation has been changed. We consider a time window of -15 to +15 days around the call. And this means we consider the change in recommendation is related to the earnings calls itself if it happened by maximum 15 days after the call. Otherwise, the possibility that this change is related to other factors is bigger, and this is not relevant for us. Similarly, we compare this change to the announced recommendations or price targets as far as 15 days before the call. In addition, we consider the change of the ratio of buy to sell rather than the counts themselves, since this ratio reflects the change in analyst opinions more broadly. So let's see what we got by our data and these recommendations of the analysts. So here we have the pre-call recommendation, the post-call recommendation, and the target price in the before and after. And we can see for each company, so for Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon, that the 4 companies we have annotated, and we have here the argument quality attributes we have, the number of total argument, the number of promises, and then the types of promises and claims that are more frequent, the most frequent, when we ignore the ones that come very rarely in the documents. And we can find that there is a clear correlation between the overall argument quality and the analyst price targets. Argument units didn't actually report consistent correlation across different companies. And we believe that we need to consider more diverse stock performance to generalize these results. So in this case, we have 4 good companies reporting good performance in the studied period. So to generalize this more broadly, we have to consider more diverse stock performance. But still, we can see a clear correlations between our data metrics, our proposed quality metrics, and the announced recommendation of the analyst. Okay, so far I have talked about the modeling, the data. I'm just going to give some general points about the state of current computational argumentation. So as NLP tasks, we have in the last 4 years, the emergence of the large language models that are trained on a massive corpora and with reinforced learning techniques, and actually those large language models are attractive for many tasks or many applications, few shot learning, text generation, conversational systems. And as I have mentioned, however, the argumentation domain, we still have a lack in the number of these studies addressing or fine-tuning these large language models. So I guess we still have a space of contribution here to analyze the performance of those models and to test them on argument mining data. And to wrap up this talk, let's recall some goals, applications, and open challenges of financial argumentations. In terms of goals, we have efficiency, so it allows the analysis of large amounts of financial data quickly and accurately, reducing the time and resources required of manually identifying or analyzing the arguments. Objectivity, of course, it eliminates the subjective bias that can occur when humans are manually reviewing financial data. Improve decision making. So that's already was our example, providing a comprehensive and objective analysis of the financial argument identifying the worthiness, detection of verified claims. So all of that can help and to inform and improve the decision making in finance. Also, one goal can be the enhanced market transparency and so on. And so these goals can foster different applications like the chat box, client chat box, search engines based on argumentation, trading, and social media analysis. And finally, I would also like to draw your attention to some open challenges. The ambiguity and the specificity of the financial language, its technical jargon, the interdisciplinary connections, the quantitative focus. So we have also issues with the numerical understanding, correct numerical understanding and interpretation in financial data, and the dynamic nature of these financial language make it one of the hardest domains to the computer to comprehend and interpret correctly. And one possible direction can be, for example, using the RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to improve those so generative models, let's say, and the recent large language models. Another challenge is the argument quality to judge it objectively. Estimating the influence period or time window of financial opinions is also very important to know how long we should still consider a given financial opinion. So those are still open challenges in the financial domain. To conclude my talk, earnings conference calls pursues both an informative function, also a persuasive function. We contributed to the theoretical data and evaluation aspects to apply argumentation to the financial area by modeling the argument structure and argument quality. And we created the first financial corpora addressing that, FinArg and FinArg quality. And we have developed some evaluation models on those data. All of that is publicly available, so we consider our work as a strong baseline for future research on both argument mining and financial domains. Regarding our future work, we want to consider more diverse range in company size and sectors, and we want to address different argumentation tasks still in the FinArg shared task series. So that's all for me. Thank you for your attention. And I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you, Ala. Thank you for your talk. And so we still have some time for some questions. If there are any questions from participants.
Yeah, Ella, thank you so much for your talks. I'm Minyu Day from National Taipei University, Taiwan. I really appreciate your work, especially you have a very strong theory in this area, especially for the finance and natural language processing for the combination for this research. And you really did an excellent job for contributing this research domains. So my question for your talk is that how did you come up with the good theory background, and then for the empirical study, and finally come up with the very good correlation analysis and recommendation? Could you please share your experience about that? Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much for your compliment and for your question. Yeah, actually, so that, as Dr. Shen mentioned, it was during my PhD. I guess the first year was purely NLP argumentation. So I have discovered different NLP argumentation tasks on the existing data sets, like about student essays and web discourse and so on. So it was, and we had applications for comparative question answering, for example. So very information retrieval, let's say, applications and use cases on argumentation. But while reading it, I was always aware that this is not only important for one specific domain. Argumentation is common in every, so it's a natural method of communication, so everyone would use. And yeah, I was interested in the financial domain, also for the stock market analysis, but it was more time series analysis and so on. So the well-known at that time methods. But yeah, while also reading, I discovered that we have to analyze it automatically, that it was highlighted, the argumentation importance in financial area, in business communication, let's say, but never studied. And that's how it started to make sense for me that we have to come up with some model to be able to have a real financial application. The point now that I guess for financial specialists, it's always hard to trust the AI recommendations or analysis, and I guess that's still the challenge here. So there are some companies at the moment who are interested to include more AI to analyze their documents, and here it's a start to also come to the real life, and I'm very happy that this comes from the theory and to the application at some moment.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Actually, I have a lot of questions. So I'm very interested in argument quality. So now we are discussing from different aspects like strong, specific, and persuasive. But like
sorry, I
traditional
can't hear you
argument-
very well.
So can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's better, thanks.
Okay, so I'm very interested in argument quality. Traditionally in argument mining community, we use like whether you will share this premise to your friend, and if annotator say yes, and many annotators say yes, means this is a high quality argument. But in your work, you use different way to discuss about argument quality. I'm curious about like, do you have some discussion or some observation related to different definition of the argument quality?
Between finance and NLP, or
Yeah, I mean, in general argument mining field, people use whether you will recommend this premise to your friend to estimate the quality of the argument. But in your case, you use different metrics like strong, specific, persuasive to evaluate the quality. So I just curious about whether you have some comparison with different or some traditional metrics related to argument quality.
Yeah. So the some of our proposed argument quality are still used in the field, like the strength of the argument or persuasiveness, or yeah, the specificity of the argument. I guess the temporal history and was not common. This is typically coming from finance, but the decision of this scale, if I can say. So when you ask, do you recommend or don't recommend this argument, then you are restricting the annotator between 0 and 1, or either it's good, totally good, or totally not good. And we wanted to give more space to the annotator. So we believe that this the argument itself should have more flexibility. So it could be good to some level, and therefore we said, okay, 0, 1, or 2, such that we don't bias the annotator to make just a rough decision if it is really good or really not good. So it could be just in the middle. And yeah, this is good enough because many annotators were then biased to this decision to say, okay, it's a bit good. It has something to say, to give it the grade of 1. There are some studies also which goes to very specific and very detailed grade, like to have 5 degrees of grade. So yeah, 0, 0, half, so 0.5, 1, 1.5, and so on. And we found that in those studies, the annotators will rarely use such a very specific or very graduated scale. They will also tend to use 3 ones by maximum. So that's why we decide to use this scale. Yeah, and I guess by comparison to other, so the other works, yeah, that's the way we compare it. We compare the scaling, so to make the decision of the scale. But in terms of the output data, I don't remember that we did such a thing on the ratios, the statistics we had. Our focus was more that we get a good degree of inter-annotator agreement, just to trust our annotators.
Thank you for your any further questions?
Okay.
I have one question regarding slide 25. You computed frequency of alpha for internal data agreement, and the score is not so high. It seems about 0.3, around 0.3. So could you clarify the reason why it cannot obtain that higher agreement between annotators? Can you hear me?
So I had part of the question about the inter-annotator agreements to interpret them, right?
Right. The question is why the agreement is seems not very high among annotator, and do you have some insight for the agreement? What caused the agreement is relatively low than other tests?
Okay. Yeah, so that's the detailed inter-annotator agreement we got. We applied here Krippendorf's alpha, and we compare it with the Krippendorf's alpha of Bashmos AR. So this group, so the group of Bashmos, they have proposals. They made a survey on argument quality and NLP, and they come up by proposal of 15 quality metrics, and they call it like a global taxonomy for argument mining. And they also use this 3 scale, okay? So we thought it's relevant to compare ourselves to them. And what they have a Krippendorf's alpha ranging from 0.174 to 0.44. What we have in average is better than that. So still the task itself is subjective, and we did some analysis about what is the main reasons of this disagreement between the annotators. So what we found is that the most important reason is the missing of unit boundaries. So we have conversations, and then we have these transcripts of earnings conference calls. So the speech to text nature of the data. So based on the used tool to convert this speech to text, we can have a good punctuation marks or not. So the missing of these punctuation marks makes it really a problem for annotators to divide the sentences. And if you divide differently, then of course you will have some level of disagreement on the annotation itself. So that was one reason. And also the multiple possible interpretations of argument structure, which was highlighted in argumentation theory, so that some people would look differently to the claim and the premise, and changing only the claim would change the premises. So there could be multiple interpretations. And also we found disagreement between the annotators in argument that includes modal verbs and uncertainty quantifications like many or some. So while using those quantifiers, usually the users didn't agree. So some would say using many is just exaggerating and it's not accurate. And some would say, okay, when there is many, then it's more strong, and they are emphasizing more strong achievements. So there were also multiple interpretation of that. So we would recommend for better annotation to have a pre-processing step with these unit boundaries done as a first step before giving the data to the annotators. And also we would recommend using a clear definition of these uncertainty quantifications in the guidelines.
Thank you so much for the detailed answer. Thank you.
Since we are now run out of time, so if you have other questions, please send email to Alan directly. So let's send our speaker again.
Thank you very much.
Now I'm going to close this session with a few information and some discussion. So